Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the RDX Sports Podcast. I'm Simon Head, and a little bit of a different one for you this week because I have managed to have a sit-down conversation with one of the most influential figures from mixed martial arts here in the UK. Dan the Outlaw Hardy is a former UFC welterweight title challenger, one of the few British fighters to have ever fought in a UFC world title fight. He was actually the first British fighter to fight in a UFC world title fight. Dan is an absolute trailblazer for mixed martial arts in the UK, and he continues to contribute to the sport, even though he's pretty much retired. I don't think he's officially retired. I don't think he'll ever officially retire, but he hasn't fought in many a year now. But he's now the head of fighter operations for PFL Europe. But in truth, the role extends far beyond that. He also does commentary. He also does analysis. He also works across all of the other different brands under the PFL banner, whether it be Bellator, whether it be the PFL Super Fight Series, whether it be the PFL Global League. So there's all sorts going on with Dan Hardy, and I managed to sit down with him during Bellator London Fight Week to just have a bit of a conversation, have a bit of a catch up. We haven't had a chat probably in a year or so it was good to catch up with Dan and find out a little bit more about what might be coming down the line for PFL Europe in particular, to get his opinion on a few different things in and around the PFL and a few things that he is planning for the future. But exciting stuff for sure coming down the line for the PFL. Lots of building blocks being put in place right now. But rather than me tell you about that stuff, let's hear from the man himself as we have an extended sit down with the Outlaw, Dan Hardy. Check it out. We're getting towards the sort of nitty gritty now of the PFL season. It's the second time around now. Given how things were first time, you're sort of learning lots of things about how the process works, how a season comes together. How's this season been in comparison with last season, and where have the improvements been in your mind?
Well, it's been a lot easier because people know what to expect now. You know, especially with the likes of Dakota. You know, she was like the canary in the coal mine the first year around, and a lot of people were on the outside watching to kind of see how it all played out. But I think, certainly Dakota, with the success that she had last year, and now she's parlayed that into success this year. You know, she's well on her way to winning $1 million, and you know what it's like in this sport. It's so difficult to make ends meet, especially as a young fighter. You know, and it's any opportunity where you can get a decent amount of money in your bank account just gives you that little bit of security that you can keep doing what you love doing for a little while longer. And I think ultimately that's what people are now seeing with the PFL Europe tournament. They're realising that they get the belt, which is a ticket to bigger opportunities, and then they get $100,000, which will give them a couple of years of like really investing in themselves to make something work. So, you know, from last year people were interested, but they were unsure what we were doing. This year, I've got people constantly, they're asking me when they can get into the tournament, when we're going to be bringing in their weight class, you know, how it's working around the rest of the world. Because, like, as you can imagine, as soon as it was announced that I was working for PFL, it wasn't just European fighters that were contacting me. So, we have fighters across Asia and Australia, South America. People constantly contacting me like, when will we get the platform and our opportunity? Which you know, the good news is it's coming. But I think, you know, we've got the first year of PFL Europe in the bag. We've got PFL MENA now cooking very nicely as well. I feel like, you know, we're slowly building that platform that we really need for all the fighters around the world to hop on board. And then
it's weird. I was talking to someone about this earlier. Like, MMA is a strange sport because most sports grow from the ground up, and you get the grassroots, and then it gets bigger and bigger. MMA grew upside down, didn't it? It grew the top of the sport first, and then you're trying to establish the roots underneath. And it's the same with PFL as well, insofar as you had the global product first. Now we've got these regional leagues, and they're being staggered in terms of how they launch. And you can kind of see the finished picture further down the line, where you've got all these feeder leagues and you've got a nice little pyramid there. But how do you plan on keeping each individual ecosystem running when in theory they're on the level together, but the standard of fighters may be different? So if you take PFL MENA versus PFL Europe, the guys in PFL Europe typically are much more seasoned and have had higher level opposition earlier in their careers. So if you then just chuck them all in a melting pot, then there's obviously issues there because it's just going to be one dominant brand, and obviously you won't want that for global growth. So how do you go about squaring that circle?
Well, a lot of it is about creating the opportunity. You know what I mean? Like, football's a good example of how it's grown around the world and how opportunities have created growth in certain areas where, you know, football wasn't particularly an interesting sport, but now it's growing even America's a good example for football, you know, soccer as they call it. It's growing so quickly because of the amount of people getting into it, the amount of talent coming into the sport. And the reason why some areas of the world are struggling with mixed martial arts is because there isn't the platform for these fighters to get started. Like, IMAF has done a really good thing in, you know, giving each one of the countries their responsibility to form a team and then bring that team to a world championships. But as you said, you know, things are working upside down. Like, we started with the global platform and then we're building the regional leagues underneath it. Now, my personal view of it, and this is a conversation I'm constantly having with the top people in the PFL, is that the global format can't be the top of the promotion. We need something above that, right? Currently, we've got Bellator Champions Series. I think in time, either sooner or later, that will become a PFL championship, right? We're going to end up with standing PFL champions across all the weight classes. Then the way that it works in because I've spent a lot of time trying to think about this and figure out how the pieces all feed into the same thing. Like, PFL Europe being one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. Yeah. If PFL Europe represents one of, say, 6 or 8 regional leagues, they all need to feed into the global format, the global season. Yeah. But then at the end of each year, that champion needs someone to fight, right? Otherwise, the championship expires and goes back into circulation. Yeah. Now, with the Bellator Champions Series, we have standing champions, which are equivalent to a UFC standing champion in the way that they're ranked. You know what I mean? Now, I think we need to keep moving in that direction. I think we need to have maybe the top 5 people in each weight class in the Champions Series, and then everybody else falls into either the global league or the regional leagues underneath. Yeah. And I also think there's room above that as well, where, you know, if you've won regionals and then global, say for example Dakota goes on, she wins global this year, she would then need a standing champion to fight to become the champion, right? So I think there are a lot of different ways where we can keep improving this. I also really very much feel like a Masters division is going to be valuable in the future as well. Okay, like over 35s or something, or over 32s, or less about age and more about accomplishment. You know, more about the fighters. Say for example, a fighter wins a European title, a global league title, then they go on and win the PFL championship, and they hold that for 2 or 3 fights. That then would qualify them to move into a bracket where they don't have to keep fighting the young sharks coming up, right? You know, the likes of Tony Ferguson, we could take that kind of fighter on a world tour around different regions and have them in good competitive fights where they can just keep entertaining the fans and you know, winning belts and money and that kind of thing. I think overall we need some better structure for our fighters, for the PFL as a brand, but also for the sake of mixed martial arts. You know, as you said, it's been built from the top down, so to get into the sport is very difficult. Like, once you're at the top, you're there, but the path up to the top, it's still, even now, it was confusing in my day, but even now it's still very, very difficult to figure out how you're going to get there. It's like a dotted line. There wasn't a line when you were fighting. Right, it's just a massive leap you had to make. So the other thing is obviously building stars, right? So the shining example of this is Dakota, right? She came in, first PFL season, ran the table, made it look easy. She's now in the global season. Anyone who's saying, well, we don't know about her, they're kind of finding out about her now. And the real test is going to be in Tyler Santos, who is probably the most well-rounded girl in the tournament, right? So she beats her, there's no question, right? But it's building the other ones in other weight classes as well. Dakota's got that it factor anyway, but I don't know, people like, I'm just trying to think, in MENA, you've got like Al Salawi's an established name over there. Australia will have fighters on the come up who have that sort of pocket of support. Lewis McGrillen in the UK is someone who, if he develops and keeps going, he's someone that could be built around, right? So how do you go about identifying these guys so early when there's so many ways careers can go south, right? Whether it be, you could look like $1 million and then you fight somebody who's had sort of 3 fights more than you, and it's like, shit, okay, he's found the ceiling already. So how do you go about identifying that, especially now you're looking as far flung as Australia and places like that? Yeah, look, you know, I mean, the ceilings for fighters are constantly moving and shifting, and a part of that is based on their own experience as well. You know, like at the moment, Dakota's ran through everybody. She's made it look relatively comfortable, but Tyler Santos is a big step up in competition, right? As would Liz Carmouche. You know, she would as well, based on experience and her technical abilities in every range.
Yeah.
The reality is, if Dakota loses to Tyler Santos and Santos becomes the 2024 champion, that's not the end of Dakota's journey, right? You know, it's going to make her better, right? She's going to improve. She's going to keep moving forward. I'm not a fan of an undefeated record. I don't like a lot of fighters now try and protect their undefeated record 3-4 fights into their career. Yeah. So many times I see a fighter coming off a loss and they look better. They've made a big improvement. Islam Makhachev's striking is so much better after he got knocked out, right? Because he realised there was a gap in his game that needed filling in. Yeah. Like if we keep raising the level around the world, eventually it will start to level out. One thing we have to keep in mind though is that there are going to be different styles in different regions, different physicalities, body types, right? You're going to get more heavyweights in America than you are in other areas of the world, right? Like we don't have a great heavyweight division in Europe. If we're looking at heavyweights in Europe, we're looking to like Poland and Germany, and you know what I mean? So this is something that we have to accommodate. But at the same time, when it comes to stars, the likes of Lewis McGrillen, you can't find this person like as they're walking into the gym on their first day. You have to let them, you know, walk the walk a little bit. And you have to sometimes let these people stumble and pick themselves back up again, you know. Like I even think, like with you know, everyone obviously is so high on Conor McGregor. I think one of the biggest turning points in his career was how he handled the loss to Nate Diaz the first time, right? I think it won him a lot of fans, and I also think it changed the way that he thinks as a fighter. So I think we need to, if anything, we need to get away from the idea that you're not a good fighter unless you're undefeated, right? And I think we need to be more tuned into the journey of these fighters. And then if, as a promotion, we can create a path for this journey to happen upon, regionals to global to a championship series to a masters division, these fighters will be able to make themselves the stars. The idea of producing stars is a bit of a backwards concept that some promoters get stuck in. I think the stars create themselves. I think we have to create the platform for them.
It's about sort of building the bottom tier of the pyramid. Once everything's there, like in 4 or 5 years' time, once everything's established, you've then got this pipeline that just goes like this. And I'm not saying promotion and relegation, but fighters can work their way up that ladder.
You're absolutely right. That's what the idea I'm pitching.
Promotion and relegation. Well, that would be, you know, that's a very easy thing for people to understand. PFL Europe for 2025. How different is it going to look? Are we going to see? Is it going to be broadened out? Are we going to see different weight classes or more weight classes? And how are we looking at bringing the season along? Are we going to have more dates in order to accommodate this? And obviously that will then presumably need to be replicated across the other ones within a similar time frame. But Europe being the one that's kind of leading the way, how do you see that panning out next year?
I mean, there's still a lot up in the air regarding that. We're still discussing whether we're going to expand our shows and weight classes and stuff. But my instinct right now is that PFL Europe will hold steady for 2025 because we've got MENA starting up, we've got PFL Africa. We're going to be opening a couple more as well very soon as well. So what we don't want is PFL Europe to get so far ahead in its development that it leaves the others behind and they're always a couple of years after us. So I think probably next year we're going to hold to 4 shows, 4 weight classes, 3 fights per fighter as well, which may be something that will shift in the future. And then for 2026 we'll look at expanding weight classes and events. I think right now, given the fact that there is just there's so much growth in the company, but at the same time it's quite disjointed in the way that it appears to the fans. I think our priority has to be to bring the whole thing together first of all, and then we can start to develop each individual thing.
Paul Hughes, AJ McKee, that's an absolutely massive fight on so many levels. How excited are you to have that one booked and to see someone like Hughes? I think he's 12-1, AJ's 22-1, and Hughes is not messing about. He wants these fights straight away. And a lot of people would say, hang on a minute, just build yourself up. Just bang, he's straight in there. I mean, what does that say about the man, and how excited are you about that fight in particular?
I mean, you know, it's a fantastic opportunity for Paul, and you know, I bumped into him a little while ago coming out of the MMA hour, and we were talking about, you know, what his plans are and stuff, and he's like, look, I don't want to wait around. I want the big fights. I want the marquee fights. I think he felt like he I think he feels like he's a lot further along than his record suggests.
Yeah.
You know, the experience that he's had on Cage Warriors, the big pressure fight situations that he's been in, I think it's moved him way past his 12-1 rec. 12-1, do you say it was?
12-1, yeah.
He's moved, in my mind, he's 20 fights into his career right now. He's also a very mature fighter as well, so he's calculated in the way that he approaches things, and he's not the kind of fighter that's gonna he's gonna be happy fighting the next guy on the ladder. He wants to be making these big jumps and taking these huge opportunities. Yeah. And look, the reality is, like, and this is different obviously because this is the pay-per-view event, but if you look at someone like Jesus Pineda, right, or Gabriel Braga, like, we didn't expect either of those two guys in the final last year, given the fact that we had Chris Wade, Bubba Jenkins, Brendan Loughnane all in the same weight class, right? But because of the way the PFL format works, sometimes you're going to get a Jesus Pineda getting an opportunity to fight Brendan Loughnane, and then all of a sudden we've got a new star that has a massive win over a former champion, and then we've discovered a star because they've taken a big chance. I think people already know that Paul Hughes is on a trajectory to stardom, but this is a very, very quick shortcut. Like, if he gets a win over AJ McKee, even if he doesn't win but he looks impressive, people are going to then hold him into that higher level of competition, and I think all of his fights are going to be on that level from this point onwards.
So is he going to be operating above the global season, or is he going to be in the global season?
I think
is that to be
discussed
at present?
As far as I understand, Paul Hughes is going to be in the global tournament next year
at 55.
At 55, that is the plan. I think it was too big and too good of an opportunity for him to turn down. You know what I mean? And I think in his mind, regardless, he's into the new stage of his career now, and regardless of what happens in the AJ McKee fight, it's a good level set for him. See where he's at, see what he needs to work on. Like the Bobby King fight wasn't a super easy fight. I think he made that a bit more difficult for himself than he needed to. But I also think that was partly down to the pressure, coming back to competition, high expectations.
All eyes were on him, weren't they?
Yeah. Like this next step up against AJ McKee, because a lot of people are going to be counting him out. It's a fantastic opportunity to shock people. And these are the opportunities that Paul's been asking for now.
There we go. Dan the Outlaw Hardy, absolute legend of the game here in the UK, giving back in a major way now, really looking to build the next generation of MMA stars, not just on this side of the pond, but across all of Europe, as well as lending his experienced voice to broadcasts of the PFL's global events, including the Bellator Champion Series, which travels the world, and the PFL Pay-Per-View Super Fight Series, which we're going to get very soon. The first one coming up next month, Francis Ngannou versus Renan Ferreira for the inaugural heavyweight title in the main event. Chris Cyborg versus Larissa Pacheco for the inaugural women's featherweight title in the co-main event. And an absolute banger of a fight at lightweight between AJ McKee and Paul Hughes. Really looking forward to that one. That's going to be a superb fight, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that one will go down on Fight Night later this year in Saudi Arabia. But for now, all eyes are going to be on Europe, because we've got the PFL Europe playoffs, effectively the semi-final stages of the PFL Europe season. That's coming live from Glasgow, Scotland, from the Hydro. That'll be live here in the UK on DAZN. We also have UFC Fight Night from Paris, France. That will be live here in the UK on TNT Sports. Renato Moicano versus Benoit Saint-Denis in the main event of that one. So it's a big, big weekend of fights here in Europe, and looking forward to checking all of that out. And you can check out coverage of all of that on the RDX Sports blog, blogs.rdxsports.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We are on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcasts, and of course, we're on YouTube as well. Massive thank you to Dan Hardy for sitting down with us for a chat during Fight Week in London. Really appreciate that, and hopefully we'll hear a little bit more from him in the weeks and months ahead as well. And thanks to you for checking out the show. Enjoy the fights this weekend, and we'll speak to you soon.